back to something you said earlier, right?
Back to chicks.
Back to chicks. All right, let's go back to chicks. So do you feel like you are? Did you ever find the who you're doing this for? Is it for chicks at all?
No, it's not for chicks.
Yeah.
No, I don't like attention
Yeah,
at all. No,
I see that. I feel like you're very low key of the guy.
yeah. I do love integrity, even the
Yeah.
people that I meet. It's Yeah, no, I just want to find someone who's like fucking real.
Why have you found that difficult so far? Or I guess you haven't been divorced. How long have you been divorced for?
A year.
Okay.
Yeah.
So have you just been kind of like decompressing?
Yeah. And just like focusing on my work, and I feel like,
Yeah.
god damn, I am like on this like unstoppable locomotive.
Yeah.
The past years
That's
professionally.
Good. That's
Yeah.
good. I mean, a lot of people say like when like a rapper gets broken up with, they'll come out with their best albums.
Oh.
So like
Yeah.
it might be kind of like this, like if you're post relationship, your post marriage, your work might be your bangers.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
La Padrona plug is opening in a couple of weeks.
Yeah. I'm very excited for that.
Yeah, I just want to find someone who's real and someone who's authentic, someone who understands this lifestyle. There's pros and cons. Like, right, like we'll jump in a plane and let's go to Copenhagen for a night and go to check out our this restaurant that just opened up, and see how actually I did that with Geranium, #1 restaurant in the world. I was like, all right, jump on a plane, let's go and have an experience. On the flip side, hey, I might get a call on Saturday night. There's a VIP at one of the restaurants, so I got to go. So you always got to take the good with the bad. So yeah, just trying to find someone real. And I got to tell you, this day and age, really hard to find, as you guys know. I mean, you're in a relationship for 4.5 years.
I'm single as hell.
I feel for you, brother.
Yeah.
It's a tough world. Politically, it's a tough world. This wokeism is a tough world. But I think more importantly, technology, it makes all of this that
I think
much
it gives
harder.
everyone the idea that they have more options.
Yeah, the illusion of choice.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I was gonna cork glass.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
What's your type of chick? Like, what do you look other than the personal stuff?
Yeah.
What about in terms of physical?
Do you prefer like on the spectrum of where we are in society? We mentioned earlier big butts, and then now it's reverse BBL. It's like, are you team BBL or team reverse BBL?
I don't know what reverse BBL would look like.
The very postmodern minimalist architecture.
Got it. That I can aspire to. I would say I like someone who's hardworking, right? And so that's probably someone who's at the gym and is working hard. Whether it's BBL or
natural,
it's got to be natural.
Yeah, got to be natural. Yeah,
it's got to be natural, like
because that's what you're saying. It's about integrity, right?
It is, yeah,
and work ethic.
Yep.
No shortcuts.
Nope.
Cheers. What are we working with here?
This is a Bordeaux that's same. That's actually had the skin on the grapes for I think 60 days. So we get a little bit of color.
Nice.
Yeah.
And are you, in terms of women, are you into a little color or just no?
I am very indifferent.
Okay.
Yeah. What I love is culture.
Yeah.
I want to see culture. My God, I'm gonna get in trouble, but I don't like, sort of the basic white girl.
Yeah. No, agreed.
Right.
I think it all comes back to what you're saying earlier. It's like, I think people need to be bullied more. Like when you have life so easy growing up in high school, like a lot of your character was built from you not getting women in high school. Yep. A lot of these basic white girls were just popular all throughout their lives, and they just haven't had time, I think, to develop that the stuff that we were talking about. And so, maybe someone who was bullied has some trauma, and then overcame it. I think that's the best kind of person, is that overcame trauma.
Yep.
Just adds character.
Yeah.
So let me put a business spin on this.
Sure.
So
you don't hire white girls.
I don't hire white girls. So just another prop to my partners. So I'm not involved with my staff at all. I think at the end of May, certainly we'll have about 750 staff. I don't communicate with any of them for the most part, except for two, which are my two partners, who's my COO, and Jody, who's my culinary. So Jody obviously is in charge of, really mentoring all of our chefs, which is a very important and powerful job. And then we have John, who is on the operation side, and you know John, right?
Yeah,
You've met him.
yeah.
And John has some of the highest, EQ on the market. Like he can really hold all of his staff accountable. And talking about sort of this millennial Gen Z, John's going to be like, "Hey, you're supposed to be at work at 8:00. It's 8:01.
Yeah.
Why 8:01?" Right. Whereas, some of these kids have been like, well, I get a participation trophy. And like, John's like, no, 8:00, not 8:01. And just constantly hold them accountable. So that's, critically important in our business. But I started to say something before I went down to the path of my partners.
That builds character.
Yeah. So, so props to my partners for allowing me to do what I do. But I've done this so many times in my career. I come out of the gate hot. Like, this fucking concept is fucking hot. We're busy as shit. Like, like my shit don't stink.
Right.
And you get the biggest ass whooping, once you start to see this decline. Right. So you guys see I got a lot of plants in my apartment. I love plants, right? Because they're sort of like the same thing. There's the life cycle of life is you're either growing or dying.
Yeah.
There's no sort of in between, right? Now, unfortunately for our DNA, if you're past 18, you're like your cells are like dying, right?
You'll be dying.
Yeah, but like this wine helps you. Yeah. Numb out the pain.
Yeah.
So in business, it's the same thing. Like you could be like the hottest iPhone 1. If you don't have an iPhone 2, someone's already beaten you up in the market and is gonna, take you out of business. So for us, that's so important. And you learn that lesson at failure. And so for me, every time I've like 10x'd is when I've failed. And so the most recent story is Porto. And actually, you know what? I'll use the Venetian.
Okay.
It's actually even more recent than Porto. So I bought this restaurant in the South Shore, iconic restaurant for years. And it was like doing nothing for business when I bought it. And I bought it 3 months before the pandemic. Like it was like the worst time to like, get into the business. I mean, I was already in the business, but to buy a restaurant. And I was like losing 30 grand a month. I was like, oh my God, how much longer can this keep going on? It's like, all right. And then the pandemic happened. Yeah. And I was like, fuck. Yeah. However, this is like when you got to put all your cards in, you're like fucking double down or nothing. So it's like, all right.
He always loses.
Yeah.
Always double down.
Yeah. Always double down.
High risk, high reward.
Yeah. That's a motto that I live and die by.
Hell yeah.
So I doubled down and I gutted out the restaurant and I said, fuck it. And I did that in 2 circumstances actually down in Weymouth. So I gutted out the Venetian and it's been the best horse I've ever bet on.
Really?
Yeah. And
I could see that place being extremely popular in there. And so both of us went there. It was amazing.
Oh, awesome.
But it's just a bit far from Boston, but I'm sure like that local crowd loves it.
Yeah, and it's built for that community.
Yeah, exactly.
Like I just want that community. Like, I brought my kids for graduation here, and like 30 years later, I want to keep hearing that. And actually, but again, that's like a learning lesson for me. It's like, okay, shit, I bought it and like at its depth, and what did I do to bring it up here? And again, if you live in the sort of Gen Z world where you get participation trophies, there isn't this sort of like motive to fucking crank it up or you're going to fail. Yeah. They're like, oh, just keep patting them on the back, them on the back. It's like, no. And my other double down in Weymouth
before you move on, what was the double down at the Venetian? Like, what did you specifically do?
I went back to my nightclub days. Yeah. Yeah. No DJ. Yeah. But what makes a nightclub successful? And I tell this to anybody, any young entrepreneur. You want to become a millionaire? Open up a nightclub. You'll become a millionaire in 6 months, or maybe a year. You'll become a millionaire. But there are 3 things that are going to get in your way fucking hard. One is going to be the lifestyle, right? Which is going to be, the hours and coming home at 4 o'clock in the morning. Can you endure that? You might be cool with it, like being out till 4 a.m., like Thursday, Friday, Saturday for 1 week or 2 weeks, 3 weeks. Do it for 52 weeks straight. Right. So if you can endure that, cool. All right, you got something there. 2 is all the rigmarole of like dealing with drunks. Yeah. All night long. Right. Good luck trying to have a sophisticated conversation. Yeah. You know who I am.
Yeah.
It's like, shut the fuck up, dude. Yeah. You're like, yeah.
No one cares.
Nobody cares, and you're
I'm
just a
Chopstick
normal.
Murphy.
Yeah.
I'm the chopstick Murphy.
The just.
Yeah. And the third thing is, drugs, alcohol, women or men, whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
And that stuff is real. Like drugs and alcohol is around you. I'm 46 years old. This is my third time saying that because I'm going to be my birthday soon.
Do you want us to censor that? We can edit it
Yeah,
over.
please. Like,
I'm 21 years old. Yeah.
And it's so easy. And the reason I said that is that I have never seen drugs in my life besides marijuana. I'm like, I've abstained from it. Like, I don't even know what cocaine looks like besides TV. I've never physically seen it, even from across the room.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's how hardcore I am. So I had a nightclub. Told my door guys, if I ever fucking see anything in here, I'll fucking rip this motherfucking place apart. And I had a big nightclub. It was like 720 person capacity. Anyway, so, and the women, right? Like, they will take you down, like, not in a bad way. Or maybe in a bad way.
I mean, in a bad way, but it'll feel good going down.
Yeah, exactly. So, but if you want to become a millionaire, you can beat those three things.
Yeah.
Open up a nightclub.
Yeah.
Easy.
And so you brought some of that practice back to the Venetian.
Yeah. So
making it sexy, making it the place to be.
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. And focus on your guests, because in a nightclub, a Heineken is a Heineken, or a Tito's and Soda is a Tito's and Soda. Like, you got two nightclubs next to each other. What makes you go to one place over the other? The product is still the same, right? It's the delivery of that product. And that's actually what I did at the Venetian. I was like, all right, you know what? I want the same food, quality and caliber of food that we have in Boston. Bring it here to this like neighborhood restaurant, and don't jack up the prices like you do in Boston. Keep it local. Service, make sure that everyone feels like, this is like their backyard restaurant. And ultimately, so made the Venetian super successful just by focusing on those like base competencies. Critically important, but it's so easy to get ahead of your skis, even on a project like Weymouth, like Venetian. You know what? I got trade, I got Porto. It's like this really cool, sexy. I'm going to do really cool. It's like, no. Something that I learned, years ago was, don't fall in love with your product, fall in love with your guest.
Yep.
It's like, oh yeah, shit. And every time I fall in love with my product is where I get in trouble.
Yep.
So even, the La Padrona opening, my hard work is done. And like all the hard work now is on my staff. But now my work is going to be is ensuring that my staff is not falling in love with their product. We have this like mortadella lettuce bib cup that we're doing, right? In theory, it sounds great. And I was just meeting with Jody just before here. I was like, okay, so how are you going to eat this? Well, it's light and it's this and it's that, and Jody's got this composition of a palate that's like, again, as I mentioned, way above my pay grade. Right. And so I have to think about that, and then I have to bring it forward to how my guest is going to experience it, right? Like, and again, that's what happens at the end of the day. And again, probably not much different than what a developer of an app is probably doing, right? They're like, great, this code is amazing for Tinder or Bumble, but what's the UX on it, right? That's like the moneymaker right there.
Yeah, fascinating. Okay, so then you were about to tell a story about your second double down.
My second double down. So I got like $30 left. Pandemic is here. I never thought like people would be this close. Never. I was like, I called, restaurateurs across the country, and I was like, hey, this is it. We're done.
Wow.
We're done. Like, I laid off all my staff. We had 537, I think was the number. Laid them all off.
Wow.
And so at that point, you're like, what do I do as a career? Like, I don't know. I'm pretty good with finance. I can probably find a finance job if they're hiring. Like, it came down to that point, like, what is going to be my pivot career? And so I ended up buying all the buildings in the neighborhood of where the Venetian is. So you went down there, you said recently, right? So I bought 13 buildings that are all adjacent to the Venetian. And I'm actually building 200 apartments and building 4 more restaurants down there. Wow. I'm building a little village down there. And
I was going to ask, is this because everyone was selling, and so you said, you know what, I'm going to double down and just buy? Or like, what was...
No, I just went knocking on the doors. It was a funeral home.
Oh, yeah.
and you couldn't go to funerals anymore, right? Because of COVID. So I knocked on the door, and the guy had it. His great grandfather started it, and he's like, "Yeah." He's like, "I'll sell." I was like, "All right, just give me a price." Give me a price. I was like, "All right, here you go, done." Next one was a hair salon. Hair salons weren't,
Yeah.
closed. Tell me your price. Boom. Okay, great. The other one was a restaurant that like burnt down 2 months into the pandemic, so that guy was out. So I just bought that place, and then the other place was a dry cleaner, and dry cleaners were done during the pandemic, so I bought that place out. I was like, I wouldn't have been able to think of all of these things if I didn't do what I did prior. My experience in finance and also my experience as a restaurateur. Because as restaurateurs, what our job is to make a really great chicken dish, whatever, and bring you from as far as we can to come in and have dinner, right? That's our job. Is like, go as far out as you can, right? If you're decently good, the neighborhood will come. If you're really good, then this market will come. If you're fucking exceptional, people are gonna get in a fucking plane to come in, right?
Travel to.
Just travel, yeah. So that's what restaurants really are. And I got to realize that again in this sort of place of, my landlords are, Boston Properties, Avalon, some of the largest developers in the world, in the country, MIT and Harvard. And I was like, okay, why are these guys calling Raffles? Why are these people calling me up to do a restaurant in their buildings? And I'm like, oh shit, I'm the dumbass. I'm the one that's adding value to their building. And I'm just like, selling sandwiches or doing whatever. But they're the ones that are ultimately winning, right? So they want me because I'm attracting people to their building. Oh, I'll do that for myself in Weymouth.
Yeah.
And that's what I did. Yeah. So I just got all my permits approved, and I'm actually breaking ground on my first building July 15th of this year.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Wow. Honestly, that's a great story, because
Yeah.
I think there's a lot to be said about, like, when COVID hit, everyone's in a state of fear, right? And so it felt probably horrible to do that, right, in the moment. But like, what made you push through that and say, you know what, my brain tells me this is a temporary thing. When this is eventually over, this is going to pay dividends. Like, how did you convince yourself to do that?
You can't. I think as entrepreneurs, I think never convince themselves enough to do it. And you mentioned a phrase earlier, which is a core belief of mine: burn the bridges, right? Burn the bridges, burn the boats. Like, you got to commit, and this is it. And so for me, it was like, burn the bridges, burn the boats. You're here. Like, it's either this or you're going to go back to corporate America.
Yeah.
And I do not want to go back to corporate America. It's just, I love people that can be in corporate America. It's a risk reward for them, right? Like every Friday, I met, someone who goes unknown, who's got a little beef with you.
With me? Really? Is it Joanna? Damn. It's because I called her old, isn't it? I said older. There's a PR lady. She's a hot older Italian lady. That's what I called her. And I think she's mad at me
because you used the word older.
Yeah.
I think she's mad at you in like in a cute way.
Yeah.
She is a fucking powerhouse.
I love her. Yeah.
She's awesome. She's like, yeah, she's fucking awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. But why did I bring her up?
I don't know. What were we talking about? Oh yeah, burning the bridges.
Burning the bridges. No idea.
Not burning the bridges.
No idea.
What were we talking about? Can you rewind us?
A high risk, high reward.
High risk, high reward. Risk mitigation.
Oh yeah. So I mentioned her name, so I probably shouldn't. We probably delete that part.
But yeah, it's fine.
But this woman who is a powerhouse at what she does.
Yeah.
And she looks and feels as if she's independent. And she was telling me the other day, she's like, I'm not independent enough to be an entrepreneur. I still want my paycheck on Friday. Like, I'll go out and kill for my food, but I just want my paycheck on Friday.
Right.
And I think a real entrepreneur really knows that they have to give that up. Right. So my partners and I are always the last to eat, literally. So, we don't get paid until there's money left over, like at the end of the month, at the end of the quarter, at the end of the year. Like, there are years that I've gone with like zero income. How does an adult go by with zero income? But it's high risk, high reward, double down. But I think if you don't feel the fucking ground and how tough it is, you can't go back up. And I think some entrepreneurs are, oh my God, let's talk about bankers. let's talk about bankers
Yeah.
and private equity. You know, you get these like young entrepreneurs who get backed by this artificial funding.
What, like the Chinese?
No, well, maybe actually, I don't know
Yeah.
much about that, but I don't know. You know, you have, I mean, locally, you have these like Harvard and particularly these Harvard students who graduate, and obviously they're extremely smart, smarter than I would ever be in any particular, you know, parallel universe. Um, but they haven't felt what the ground feels like, right? And that is like critically important to be a successful, I believe, entrepreneur. I think there's something that they say like Harvard people are in private equity and then Stanford are the entrepreneurs.
Oh yeah.
It's like something, there's some kind of bi-coastal kind of rivalry that they have. And again, that's above my pay grade. I don't know much about, you know, higher ed, academia. But
you have 2 masters, so you probably know
a little bit, yeah, a little bit. I am a little like micro freak analyst on the side.
Oh really?
Yeah. Quantitative analysis is like.
Well, that's what you kind of.
That's what you get freaky too.
Yeah, actually, I do, man. I'll put on like my deep house EDM and I'll get my Excel up and I'm like,
damn,
fuck.
Spreading those sheets.
Spreading those sheets.
That's exactly it. That's exactly it. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Why are we talking about this? Who knows?
I have no idea,
dude. Who knows? At this point, dude, we're like almost. None of us have eaten today. I'm
you know what? I haven't eaten at all. I had egg bites from Starbucks. That's about it. Yeah. We should order some Saloniki. I don't know. Talk about psychology. We live in a world where everyone thinks they're more important than they really are. They're depressed. They're stressed. There's anxiety. You know, my point in life is that unless you have a diagnosis from the doctor that is terminal, shut the fuck up.
Amen.
Shut the fuck up. You know, be happy. We get to breathe. You know, we're fortunate, lucky enough that we get to breathe. And you are in charge of your own destiny. You know, I think sometimes I sort of forget how lucky I am, or some people are to be conscious of that. And some people just sort of like, they're always complaining or they're always like sad.
Totally with you. I mean, I think that's a lot of that too is growing up an immigrant. I mean, you were actually an immigrant, but you know, my parents were immigrant. I was born here, but I think hearing their perspectives too, like sometimes I'll think about, I get caught up in the, oh, I feel down, I feel anxious. I think it's almost a little bit trendy these days to have mental, like kind of like anxiety or whatever. It's like people like to use that as an excuse for a lot of things. And sometimes I can get caught up in that as well, where I'm like, you know what? If I think about what my parents had to go through to get here, like, what the fuck am I complaining about? You know, it's like, and that's what I always come back to. And it's like, you know what, let's just get back to work or to life, to living. And to
have you been to Vietnam?
I have, yeah. I the first time I was back there was, or I should say, the first time I visited was probably after college. So it was. I didn't have a connection to that part of my life until I was fully kind of like developed physically, not mentally, because I'm still definitely, you know. Yeah. He always says I'm like, you know, autistic or back in the I'm something, but yeah, no, I think being fully conscious, at least I can say, when I went back to Vietnam was very powerful, because seeing that kind of it's kind of like my roots. I think, I don't know, like if you feel similarly going back to Greece, but it's like it was very visceral. Like, whoa, this is like where my family comes from. This is like my heritage, and that was very powerful.
In so many different ways, right? For me, it even goes back to food. And I don't know, it goes back to food because I think that's the profession that I'm in. And so I think when I rewind the tape, I look for sort of common denominators that have to do with food. And if you go by Saloniki, MIT, I have on the window 3 large frames of my grandmother. They're probably like 15 feet tall. And both my grandmothers were so, immeasurable in the amount of influence that they gave me. Again, even around food, I didn't really communicate much with my grandmothers. Like, I don't think that there's any like a life lesson that I've learned from my grandmothers. It's mostly from my mom and dad, probably because of been sort of bounced around so much. But the thing that they gave me was food. And their food, as we talked about earlier, like imagine perfecting making whatever you're going to make, a pizza or a pasta or whatever, for 80 fucking years. Like that is just, that's art. I mean, that is art. And every grandmother has that art and that ability. So, for me, culture and food, as we talked about it earlier, but are so, so important. And that's what, grandmothers did for me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was much the same for me too. I think some of the dishes that I remember being like my favorite in my life were also my grandmother's as
Mm-hmm.
well. That is a good question though too, because I think a lot of people in the food industry are they either get into it because they just were like that's all they know in the sense of like maybe you grew up in it,
Mm-hmm.
but also some people that didn't grow up in it will go into it because they had a very powerful experience with a either a dining experience or a specific dish that they remember changed their lives. Like,
Mm-hmm.
did you have one of those, or is it more because your dad was in it and everything else?
I think probably because my dad was in,
Yeah.
to be honest with you, I think that's how I got into it. Um, I remember the value of a customer really from my dad.
Mm.
Again, we come to America. My dad opens up this like little diner, or he bought this little diner. He didn't know anything about food. He's got two young boys. I was 9, my brother was 10, and we just saw my dad work really hard and didn't have any business acumen. Understandably, he came from like both actually my parents come from agricultural backgrounds. My mom's family was in peaches. They
Mm.
produced and grew peaches. And my dad was in tobacco.
Mm.
So every time we go back, particularly like I'm familiar with, you know, I know how a tobacco field and I know how tobacco grows and how they dry it and how that all that gets processed. Um, but my beginning was really seeing my dad interact with customers. And I think that left an invaluable lesson. So much so that when I was bartending, I was like 17, 18, 19, 20, up until I think I was about 24. Bartending, I won best bartender in Boston like 3 years. In 2000, sorry, 2000, not two fucking thousand. 98, 99, 2000, I moved out to LA.
Mm.
And then 2001, I got best bartender in Boston. And I thought I was just like fucking hot shot bartender, coolest fucking kid. And my dad, for the first time and only time, came to see me. And he brought my uncle from Greece because my uncle from Greece was here. He's like, let's go see Eric. He's working at the club.
Mm-hmm.
And my parents don't drink at all.
Mm.
My dad's never been to a nightclub except for that one time to go see me. And it wasn't because of a shame thing, but I think it was because my dad had a diner and he was up like, crack of dawn every morning. Anyway, so he comes and sees me at the club, and I was inspired by Tom Cruise and Cocktail,
Mm.
believe it or not. So I was a flair bartender.
Mm-hmm.
I
You
can
still got it or no?
I still do
Oh,
actually.
okay.
Believe it or not, like if I find a bottle, I can just like I'm not gonna do it here because I'm
Yeah,
gonna
yeah.
fucking break it. And the cleaner's not coming until Thursday,
yeah.
so so we got a little while. Anyway, so I come and I was like, fuck, my dad's here. This is fucking amazing. I'm at the club. I'm like 5 rows deep, like into the bar. It was like amazing. Like fucking boom, boom, boom.
Mm-hmm.
I'm flipping bottles.
Mm-hmm.
The next day, I go to my dad's diner. I was like, hey, what'd you think last
Mm-hmm.
night? And I was like, when I bartended too, like I didn't drink. I'm like
Right.
fucking hardcore. Like I'm here for work. And my dad's like, yeah, you're pretty good. He's like, but I saw that every time you gave change, this is back in the day where cash existed. He's like, when you gave change to a customer, you never looked them in the eye and said thank you.
Mm.
And I was like, never mind about a tip.
Right.
This is just about giving change to a customer because he bought liquor from,
Mm-hmm.
and I should say thank you. I think that again is a pivotal moment for me, and just to be so thankful about the guests. Like,
Mm-hmm.
again, we have a busy restaurants, and I could say, fuck it, man, I got so many, fuck it. They don't like the chicken, fuck them. It's
Mm-hmm.
like, no, man, every person, every dollar counts. Because from a analytical standpoint, the numbers are so slim. You really have to treat everybody well. But I want to make everyone feel like you're going to grandmother's house.
Yeah.
Like you're going to your grandmother's house, not because she's got the best conversation, she's got great food, But more importantly, it's the way your grandmother makes you feel. Grandmother or mother, like, you know,
Right.
any family member that is sort of synonymous in your head about that. They make you feel amazing. And that's what ultimately, that's what a restaurant is.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to Zuma or, where'd you go?
Nobu.
Who?
Nobu.
Nobu.
Yeah.
Because they make you feel amazing.
Yeah.
Well, you'll judge. It's not because like the sushi grade was better than the other, because they're both the same sushi grade. It's not because one person packed and rolled it different than the other. It could have, and most likely is, you know, that front door experience when you sat down, the server, everything that they did, and they handheld you throughout the whole process. It's that real love, and I think that's the most important part in a restaurant.
Yeah, I mean that's a great story. I think it's humbling to in that moment, right? That what you're saying is you basically were you mentioned earlier falling in love with the product. In that moment, you were probably falling in love with your product of the flair bartending,
Mm-hmm.
and then you forgot that this is all for the customer at the end of the day, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Very powerful. So, for the last bit while we wait on our food, I do want to talk a little bit about Boston and your thoughts on Boston scene.
Mm-hmm.
But before that, I think last time we talked, you mentioned something, which is that you've opened a lot of restaurants. The restaurant that kind of like put us in contact was Trade, and you
Trade
have
or Porto?
Trade was the first one, and
Got
then
it.
Porto we did second. But Trade was, and you mentioned Trade being that's the older one. So
Yep.
that you said the analogy of it being like sort of at this point, what is it like 11 years old?
No, almost 14.
14. Okay, so it's almost 14 years old at this point. That I mean that's a long time in the restaurant industry. You said, well, we have Trade, and that's kind of like at this point the uncle or even the sort of grandpa.
Mm-hmm.
We have Porto, which is like kind of the teen,
Mm-hmm.
and then you have La Padrona, which is now going to be like sort of the
Yep.
newborn. In terms of longevity, right? How do you keep Trade? How did Trade become a establishment rather than becoming the sort of creepy uncle?
Mm-hmm.
Like, how did you like how did you handle that?
Yeah. I think it's always evolving, always, because when do you go from that creepy uncle to that like really cool
The
old
beloved,
uncle?
yeah. Like,
Yeah,
oh,
right.
I want him around my kids.
Yeah, like the quirky old uncle or
Yeah,
something like that,
because
right?
you know you can trust him.
Yeah,
But he's still fun.
yeah. Let's go back to relationships.
Sure.
That's a better subject.
Yeah, let's do it.
Someone said to me really recently, he's become a dear friend of mine. His name is Tasso. He's Greek off the boat, married, one of my best friends. And he said to me, Eric, single men that get old become the weirdest people, right?
Watch out.
And it's always that weird uncle that's at the
Yeah.
table. He's the single uncle that never got married or the whatever,
Mhm.
right? So
We call them diddlers.
what you call them? What?
Diddlers.
Diddlers?
Yeah, a lot of times they resort to diddling.
Ah,
Yeah.
like what's diddling?
Just like, you know,
Funneling, playing with
fondling.
stuff.
Yeah.
Fondling. Oh,
Like they get a little too creepy, right? Because
got
they've been single all their lives. They're like, I just want to touch anything that shows me
Ah.
affection.
got it. Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Ooh, wow, you guys, that's a dark, dark door. I was thinking like, you know, these weird uncles just get into like weird hobbies.
Oh, like bowling.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought you meant fondling.
Yeah, no,
Oh, okay,
no,
okay.
no,
All right.
no.
Bowling, pinball. Okay.
Your
Yeah.
hobby.
All right, let's turn it
Yeah,
back.
like
Yeah.
air guns. Like, what the
Oh,
fuck is an air gun? Like, whatever. I have an uncle that who's into air guns,
Mhm.
but also what makes them really weird in an endearing and cute way, and we'll go back to the restaurants about this
Sure.
after, but is that a weird uncle does not compromise in a family or familial conversation, right? Like your mom and dad knows how to interact with two people, like because they do that all day long. If you're by yourself, like a single guy, my shit don't stink, and that's it.
I see what you're saying. Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But a couple has to compromise. Like, okay, man, your shit stinks a little bit. Okay,
Mhm.
yeah, my shit stinks a little bit, whatever. And I don't know how we're talking about like weird uncles. Going back to trade, so always using a reference for me is super important. And I went to trade the last 2 weekends on a Saturday night, and I got to tell you, oh, so here's what I did. Cold mic moment here.
Mhm.
I'm just kidding. I had someone who recently bought a restaurant that I had sold.
Mhm.
They bought it recently, but they didn't buy it from me. I had sold it a
Oh,
decade and a half ago, and they just bought it. And I was so successful with that restaurant. It catapulted me financially and operationally, and I think just sort of in the city. And I didn't really take as much credit as I think I should have. And so then I went on to my next project and blah, blah, blah. So much so that that restaurant got sold again.
Mhm.
And the person that bought it was this sort of quintessential, as mentioned earlier, this the type of bartender who goes from like one place to the next, and then like 20 years later, they're still a bartender. So they just recently bought that. And so I drove by on a Saturday night at 8 o'clock, and the place was closed. I was like, hold on. I thought you were an entrepreneur and your place is closed on a Saturday night. So much so that I had a buddy who was asking me, should I invest in that? And I was like, sure, but show me the business plan or tell me about the business plan. And there's all these beautiful colors and charts and images in the business plan. And I said, and I think this is the biggest challenge in our industry. And I said, who's going to run it, right? Because if you come up with a code for a new Bumble, right? Awesome. Someone's going to write that code, and that code is going to be written between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. over a certain amount of time. And the code is set it and forget it. Problem in our industry is that so many people come up to us and they're like, man, I have the best idea for a muffin. I'm going to make $1 billion for this muffin. Do you want to invest in my muffin shop? Making $1 billion in food has nothing to do with how good your muffins are. It's about how well you can produce those muffins 7 days a week, every single day from now until eternity, right? So you mentioned, we didn't talk about this, but you mentioned earlier about process and how do we have process in our company, which is super, super important. But I go back into the diner and I look at, wow, here's someone who thought they played in the same space as I did, and 20 years later they cannot play in the same space, so much so that the place is closed. And secondly, then I go back to trade, or as I do my rounds on a Saturday night, I go to trade on a 14-year-old restaurant on a Saturday night, and it's wall to wall packed. And that to me, I was like, fuck, what we do, like we got to give ourselves more credit. If a restaurant lasts, I think any restaurant can last 1 year. Lasting 3 years, all right, you're pretty good. 5 years, fuck, man, you're like, you've just beat every odd on the table. 10 years, less than 1%. And anything above that, it's like you are sort of a diamond in the rough. And so how do we think about that creepy old uncle in the restaurant? It is this constant, I don't want to say reinvention, that might be too strong of a word, but what is the guest looking for? Does the decor match our neighborhood and match our consumers? Are they coming because they love XYZ and let's keep giving them XYZ? So it's a long-winded answer to your question, is that regardless if it's an old uncle or a hot, 21-year-old prom queen, you have to give it as much attention that it doesn't sort of, you either got to make sure that that prom queen stays on track and stays true to that weird uncle, like bringing him on track. And this sort of like back and forth, we have 10 restaurants right now in our portfolio. We'll have 14 in the next 24 months. There's a lot of, these sort of, metrics that we got to move back and forth and say, okay, where's this in the market? Where's that in the market? Where's that in the market? And again, sort of tying everything back again, sort of, my plants and the life cycle, there's life and death. So, you got to understand and look at every business critically, like when it reaches its sort of, plateau, it's either you got to cut the cord because it's going to fall, or you got to reinvigorate it. And so much, in my career, again, I've been an entrepreneur 20 years now, since 2004. I've never cut the cord on anything. It's always about keep putting in energy, keep putting in energy, keep putting in energy. And that energy always pays back, has always paid back. But I am the type of guy that I have the resources to do that. Resources meaning time. And so I don't know how all of this will play out if and when I have a family, right? Which is very, very interesting.
Yeah, I'm sure you've thought about it though, right? So
I
like,
have.
what kind of like solutions have you kind of envisioned? Like, would you cut back on work? Would you hire more? Like, would you hire sort of like a younger you to do what you're doing now?
No, I think every time an owner leaves the company, there's a really big disruption.
Yeah.
And sort of the transition plans happen, like Steve
Mm-hmm.
Jobs, with Cook was not, like, let's put a Craigslist post and see who wants to be the CEO of the company. It's a long, long plan. The same with Microsoft and Amazon
Mm-hmm.
and so on and so forth. So I'm still young enough where I'm going to be doing this for a very, very long time. But I'm always very aware of who is this going to get passed down to. I'll always chair my boards and ensure that my vision always comes true. But I'm smart enough to know that, when I'm 60, a 40-year-old is going to have a bigger vision. Even so much so, like even today, like I do a lot of stuff with universities. I listen to those young fucking kids. They're like 18 and 22. I listen to them hard. Sometimes we do some business cases with HBS and they're a little bit older. They're like 26, 28, 30 years old. Listen to them hard because as good as I think that I am, I know that I'm not perfect. And I think that's what makes me a good entrepreneur is that my job is to lead. My job isn't to always make the right decision. My job is to lead. And if you tell me we should go there and he tells me he should go there, okay, I'll make a decision. And if I say, let's go there, then my job is to really get everybody to go there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. Do you feel like though that, like you mentioned 60, that's like if you want to be a father at some point, like that's probably going to be earlier, right?
Yeah.
And have you thought about what might happen in that case?
If I'm a father?
Yeah, if you're gonna have a family, because you mentioned like
Yeah.
the work life, the work that you're doing right now is not maybe sustainable with a family.
Yeah. It depends on my partner and what kind of life she wants to lead. Do we want to be the type of family where we want to raise a kid in Europe and you know what, I'm going to sort of take a hiatus and a sabbatical and I'll sort of pass this on to, next in command? Maybe, probably not. Um, it's really hard for me to answer that. I think ultimately I do want to find a partner. I think building a family. Otherwise, this is great, and your legacy doesn't necessarily, for me anyway, mean as much if I don't have a family.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think business is great. Businesses come and go, all day in and day out. But family and being able to say, like I've referenced great grandfathers in today's conversation, whether it was where my name came from, my great grandfather being a priest, to my father being an entrepreneur, restaurateur, to my grandfathers being farmers, like they owned their own farms. So that holds a legacy. But if you don't have someone good to pass it on to, like no one really thinks about McDonald's as in Mr. McDonald's or Ray Kroc, right? So anyway.
Well, okay, so let's shift to the last segment. We always like to talk about Boston with a lot of the
Let's
people.
talk about chicks.
Yeah, we'll talk about chicks in Boston. All right. So if you were gonna have maybe like a 27 to 38-year-old woman that you're talking to,
Yep.
what are your places that you would bring them for a date?
I actually don't think those exist, and actually my next projects coming up are actually all about that demographic. And let me tell you why. I've been in Boston literally in like this neighborhood 30 years.
Yeah.
So I went to Suffolk, so I lived in financial district in downtown Crossing. So I know this market really, really well. Boston was always a city as a bartender where academic years, like fucking busy, busy, busy. And then, whether it was summer vacation or, Christmas holidays, like the city like depletes and then it comes back in and does this. Over the last 30 years, we have some amazing private equity, venture capital in the city. Like General Catalyst, for instance, like one of the best incubators in the world. Next to Silicon Valley, I mean, we're like right there. So that's like in private equity, venture capital. Undoubtedly, bio and pharma, best in the world, right? They're all here now, Boston and Cambridge. You have Harvard, MIT, they're not going anywhere, as far as I know. You have Fidelity and State Street. You have some like really big financial institutions. So Boston of today is not Boston of even my Boston of yesterday. I think we were the first city in the world to have 2 Four Seasons. Um, the Raffles Hotel started in Singapore, and they're all over Europe, all over in the Asian market. They're in the Middle East. They're in Europe, and Boston was their first American property.
Really? Okay.
Not even North American, like continental American property. So, we're close to Europe. We're like, a couple hours away from New York. So Boston, I think, has a lot of, really, really cool stuff. So it's not the Boston of yesterday. And it's incumbent on us to really bring the F&B and the entertainment to the next level. Because now we know that General Catalyst and MIT and Harvard are keeping people here. All right, good. Let's entertain them. It's our job. And off camera, we talked about licensing and permitting in Boston. It really needs a lot of work. And I think they are working on it. But to your question specifically, I've always known Boston as you come to Boston, you're 18 years old, you're going to go to college, you're going to live in Austin, Brighton. That's like, it's like cheap rent, close to schools. You're going to graduate from Austin, Brighton, graduate from school. You're going to go to South Boston. You're going to live in South Boston for a few years. You're going to go to Lincoln, Capo Loco, which I think those places are amazing. Like they've just nailed it. You're going to graduate from South Boston. You're going to move over to the Seaport. So if you've made the transition from South Boston to Seaport, you're going to be probably from 28 to 40. But again, you're probably finding your mate, your partner, you're starting a family, you're getting married, you're having kids. At that point, you're out of the city. Usually around 35, latest at the 40, you're 40 years old, you're out of the city. And then you come back into the city when you're 55, when your kids are, or you become an empty nester, and you come back into the city and you go into Beacon Hill or Back Bay, right? South End, if you're a different demographic. Well, gays are, have always populated South End. So that's sort of like the evolution of Boston. But again, that was sort of a little bit of yesteryear. And I think it's incumbent on us to bring more opportunities and options to say, hey, when you're 35 and 40, you don't necessarily need to move to Needham or North Shore, South Shore. Like you can stay in the city. Now, I can't do anything about public schools or anything like that, but I want to give you options for you to say, you know what, I don't need to leave. I can stay here.
At least consider it.
Yeah, exactly. So, to your question, I don't actually think that there's a lot of options for 28 to 45-year-olds in the city because
that's where they're all going to the suburbs.
They're all going to the suburbs.
Okay, interesting,
right?
Interesting.
So, you can go to, again, if you go to Zuma, it's like, 28 to 35-year-olds that have a little bit more expendable cash. But you go to Ocean Prime and you go to Davio's, you go to, Mastro's, it's an older demographic, right? So, how do you find that sort of in between? And actually the next 3 projects that I'm opening are specifically geared exactly to that. Because when I go to Manhattan, those are the places that I'm looking for. Like I'm 46, I want to find a place that I don't want to be next to 22-year-olds, and I don't want to be in a quiet dining room where they're serving cod, right? I want something sexy, something sleek. So I'm sort of like skirting around your question because I don't really know that there's a lot of answers. I besides my restaurant group, which I think we try to straddle as much of like cool, hip, and good food, like really like Jody Adams food. I really enjoy Columbus Hospitality Group. I think Mistral, Sorolina, Ostra are sort of my go-tos when I'm out in the city if I'm not at my places.
Yeah. No, I mean honestly, you may have skirted around the answer, but I think that was an amazing answer because it gave a breakdown of sort of the Boston life cycle or the journey of someone who might live in Boston.
Yeah.
But I guess, all right, so then if that's the gap, pre-gap, so pre-20, maybe pre-30, if you're going to be taking the under 30 girl out on a date, and this is not like in a creepy way, but like if she happens to be mature for her age, and you're going out for a date, where might you take her?
Okay, so I think there's 2 questions in there. I think where would I take someone? Again, it would probably be Columbus Hospitality. I would probably go to Ostra. I want really good food. I want to be in a place where I can hear you and enjoy the conversation. I think if you're under 30 and you want a cool, hot, happening place, you're going to go to, Chris Jameson's places at Koji, Yvonne's, Marielle, those types of places where there is a lot more energy. It's louder, and I don't necessarily, really care about what you're saying. I'm here for the lights, music, the ambiance, and for the visual effects, which is great. So I think if you're under 30, I think he provides a really, really good market for that. And I think it was very well underserved. I think Ed Kane, who has been sort of a mentor from afar for me.
Oh yeah. In what way?
I met Ed back in probably 1998. He used to come into the bar that I worked at. He owned a couple of restaurants in the South Shore, not too far from the Venetian, and like really, really good restaurants. And so he's become sort of a mentor afar from like, I'll probably have a conversation with him once a year, once every couple of years. And he has been able to sort of stand the test of time. He knows, he's got sort of his finger in the pulse of like what's happening in the market. And nothing that he has, generally speaking, well, is old. Everything is like sharp. It's new. He sees what's going around the world. I think the other thing that I appreciate about him is that he does have a younger partner, Randy, and it's almost like it feels like Jody and I. Jody. Like I'm partners with Jody. I'm sort of like the younger of Jody, and he's got his finger on the pulse. Now, I don't know much about his personal life, but I don't think that he's got a white picket fence house in the burbs. Nor do I aspire to have a white picket fence house in the burbs. And actually, my first partner in the nightclub when I first opened, who was a gentleman that I referenced earlier, he was 30 years older than me. I realized early on then that he didn't have a normal, domestic life. He was divorced and his kids and, whatever. And it kind of goes all, back to it. I had a dinner. It goes back to how tough our industry is. It seems sexy from the outside. I mean, I can't tell you how many times people come up to me. I want to open a restaurant. This is fucking great. This is like, oh my God, you are like that, blah, 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 blah. I want to invest. I want to open. And then when you sort of open up the back door for them to see, they're like, oh shit, that's not something that I'm willing to do. From an investment side, like, I think we do really well from an investment standpoint, but I think we've mitigated a lot of risk. But any other restaurants, like really hard to sort of prove and kind of like make money. But aside from that, the lifestyle is just so unbelievably tough that when people see behind the curtain, they're like, oh shit. So again, I think for Ed particularly, he's lasted the test of time. And I think Chris Jameson at Koji, I think he's pushing the envelope. And I think the city needs it in a lot of different ways. I think he's opening people's minds and perspectives and doing a really good job of it. And I think, Columbus Hospitality Group has nailed consistency and hospitality. They're fucking great. And where we stand is sort of somewhere in the middle, right? Like, yeah.
Yeah, I think the more I talk to people, those four groups always come up. So it's A Street, it's Columbus, Big Night, and Koji.
Yeah,
and it's like, do you feel like there are any upcomers or newcomers that you see like pushing the envelope?
Yeah, well, I sometimes forget about Broadway. Loco, Lincoln, Capo.
Yeah. Southeast is a whole thing.
Southeast is its own little like
yeah
market. And actually, Eric Allenbach, one of the principals, I haven't talked to him in quite a while, but him and I grew up in the same industry, and sort of a lot of my contemporaries today, even I mentioned Ed Kane, like I go back 20 plus years with Ed. I've known him, so it takes a long time, as with any other industry, it takes a long time to sort of build that foundation. But once you do, you realize how stable that it can be. But there's a lot of like flash in the pan sort of, people that come and go. But anyway, so to direct to your question, I really do like that group. Eric and his group up in Southie. I think I own some property up in Southie, and
Mhm.
I think I need to thank him for raising the value of my property, because I was there before he got in there,
Mhm.
and I think it was his restaurant groups that made Southie a place that you want to move to.
Yeah, yeah. I
Besides that,
mean,
it was like old.
right, those names, I mean, that's where people go.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I
Yeah.
totally agree.
Yeah.
All right, so last question before our food gets here is you mentioned a little bit about like the white picket fence and how that's not what you aspire to, and it's also not what you think a lot of the people you look up to aspire to or have. I think a lot of like doing your own thing or setting out on an entrepreneurial venture is like you might have a little bit of a contrarian nature in you where it's like I don't want to live like everybody else.
Mhm.
Do you think that's true, or like what do you aspire to if not the norm then? Right? Like what does your ideal life look like if not the white picket fence? And I ask that not because I want the white picket fence, but just to spark
Yeah.
conversation or thought.
Um,
I don't know if you've thought about it, but like what is it?
yeah, I mean, I know that my daily life is not like anyone else's. Um, I steep myself in my thoughts, and they have to be um, virgin thoughts of mine. I was, just if you walk down the street and you just see people walking like this. I'm like a big, very like anti-social media. Chopstick Murphy's like,
Yeah, fuck him. That guy's the worst.
um, I'm anti-social media, not
Thank you.
in a sort of you know really bad way, but in a way of it doesn't allow you autonomy into your own thoughts. You're walking down the street. Was that?
You want some?
No. I get plenty. You're not walking down the street thinking about what your mind wants you to think. You're walking down the street and you're thinking about what Mr. Zuckerberg wants you to think and what that algorithm. So, in order to set yourself apart, you have to detract from that. So, it was actually interesting about the white picket fence. When I got married, I asked my newly wife, I said, hey, let's go to the burbs. And my wife wasn't from America, she's from Greece. I was like, hey, let's move to the burbs, right? Like raise a family and kids, and they go to like a white picket fence and they go to school. And she's like, what are you going to do on a Saturday morning? I was like, I'm going to, like, I don't know, mow the lawn. She's like, you are going to go mow the lawn. I was like, oh, shit. Like, I said it to myself, and I'm like, I'm not going to go fucking mow the lawn. Like, I live in the city. I wake up in the city. I'll go to like my tante. I'll go to like my gawa coffee. Like, I got to like check out what's like happening in the neighborhood. And I think, again, to your question, you need to, I think, to be a real entrepreneur, you have to cut out all the noise. You got to cut out all, like, at least 80% of what people are telling you to do. That's another thing. Oh, I want to talk about that.
Let's talk about it.
Yeah. But I think to be a real entrepreneur, try to reference this a little bit about sort of like what you do. We had a university do a case study on Saloniki, right? And so we had 500 freshmen just like do a case study on Saloniki and blah, blah, blah. And almost every single group came back and they said, just post something viral and it's going to be awesome. How easy is it to post something viral?
It's pretty easy if you're me.
Yeah. Good answer.
Yeah.
Good answer.
But it's very hard. Yeah,
it's very hard, right?
But it's a lot like what you're saying with restaurant stuff. It's knowing the audience and the market and just serving them. You can't fall in love with your shit.
Yep.
Just like know what speaks to the people, right?
Yep. Yep.
That's what a lot of virality is.
Yep. Exactly. And it's so important. Like, a lot of people think, like, they get it in their head. They're like, oh, I'm just gonna post something, or everyone's gonna follow me. Like, it's like, no, you're not an influencer. You haven't even done anything to, and you were just sort of like, lucky for.
My question was around white picket fences. What as far as
so you have to get away from the norm, right? To be in your own wavelength. Your brain has to think about its own thing. I have not tons of books, but I'm always reading stuff, because I can, as anyone else, I can like fall victim to social media, and I can tell Zuckerberg and Mr. YouTube and whatever to tell me what I should be thinking about and what content is good. But with a book, you're making a conscious decision that for the next half hour, this is the content that I want to take in. So, I think being an entrepreneur, you have to realize that the white picket fence cannot be for you. And some of my investors are some of the who's who. There are a few billionaires. They're icons here in the city. And again, I'm sort of like looking from afar from them, and every chance I get to get in a room with them, I'm having these conversations with them. Not so many F-bombs, but yeah, same conversations. And sort of I hear kind of the same thing. Like, you have to be you. You got to believe in yourself. And, this sort of like 9 to 5 or this vanilla is probably not suited for an entrepreneur. Again, even for like Mark Zuckerberg, I don't know much about him, but I'm pretty sure he doesn't go to work 9 to 5 or never has. It's like, it's a labor of love. One of the things is, I try not to be addicted to my phone and social media, but when I sleep at night, and I know that it's not good to have it next to me, but I'll get a phone call because one of the alarms are going to go off. So I got to like go check in on it. So, if you're with a girl and the phone rings up at 2:00 in the morning, she's like, who's fucking calling you at 2:00?
Is it Teresa?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's the fucking alarm company. It's like I got to put on, get my gun, go down there, and
Yeah.
Anyway.
Well, amazing. Our all of our gear is about to run out of battery, and we're probably too drunk to not start using racial slurs. So we'll wrap up, but we want to plug all the beautiful things that you have coming up. Can you tell the people what you would like to promote?
Yeah, so I want to promote my Bumble profile.
Fuck Bumble though, straight up.
Yeah, fuck Bumble. No,
what's your favorite dating app?
I don't do them. I don't even know what's out there. I mean, I hear a lot of my friends are doing Hinge, and
are you on like the elite ones? Because like there's specific apps like, for like rich people or famous people.
Yeah, like Raya.
Yeah.
No, it's the same shit. Same shit. Yeah, been there, done that. Nope.
Yeah.
No, it's again, I think as an entrepreneur, like, I know what I like.
Yeah.
I think every girl that I've met that I've been really interested in, I'll find you.
Would you be interested in doing this just came to me, but like, what you like, just like a Boston specific, just specific to you, bachelor, like kind of contest?
Specific to me?
Yeah, like you just say what you want and then they come out.
Yeah, no, I mean, it sounds amazing. It sounds like
but it's one guy, 25 girls.
It's a lot of work. It's a lot.
What if I put a picture of you like on whatever Instagram and just be like, hey, if you fit this description, DM Andy, send him your nudes, and then we'll see.
Maybe filter. I'll get you the prime candidates.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
No, again, I'm so in love with my work that Mrs. will find her way to me.
Sure.
Yeah. I think it's and to be, again, I'm old school, so I appreciate the old organic way. I appreciate walking down the street and meeting someone.
Do you catcall women at all?
What's that?
Just like hey, shouty. Yeah.
No, but I did. Like, I've met every person that I know out in the wild. Let's just leave it that way. Yeah, my ex-wife, for instance, was working the doors at a nightclub. There's another girl who was just like walking down the street, got her phone number just out of the blue. And it's not because of anything, but I think it's just like grab the bull by the horns. You like something, you like it.
Don't overthink, just go in.
Yeah.
Do not think about it. That's the same thing. Yeah.
Going back to the last plug that I have. So plug all my restaurants.
Let's plug those before the camera runs out, and then we'll go back to this interesting conversation.
5 Salonikis,
yep.
Which is the Greek fast casual, which is getting delivered hopefully like any hot minute now because I am starving.
Heading your way, it says. Joseph.
Awesome. Food, same quality as all the full service restaurants. I mean, you know what I love? It's been 8 years now. I love when people are like, my God, I love Saloniki. I love Saloniki. I love, and actually even our wheat, we get our wheat from Europe. So it's like this non-GMO, doesn't, no seed oil sort of thing.
My girlfriend actually put me onto Saloniki.
Oh,
she said, she was like, have you tried this place? Saloniki is probably my favorite fast casual. I was like, no. And so we started going to the Harbor Square.
Awesome.
Yeah, really good. Really
awesome.
Good.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So 5 of them, Fenway, MIT, Harvard, One Beacon, and then Newbury. Trade, which is
creepy uncle. No, the not creepy uncle.
The not creepy uncle. Yeah. No, it's like a sexy restaurant right on the cusp of the seaport. Very modern Greek. Our chef there is very, very forward.
Beautiful for birthday dinners, any kind of event like that.
Yep.
Just a gorgeous dining room and exceptional food.
Yep.
That's where I went for my birthday this past year, actually.
Awesome. And then Porto.
Wait, what were you saying about the chef? What's his name?
His name is Alavi.
Yeah. I've been DMing him. He's very,
great guy. And, he's got a very cultural background. I think like Italian and Bangladesh. And then Porto, which, we love. It's coastal Mediterranean seafood. Or really coastal Mediterranean. I wouldn't even say seafood. Coastal Mediterranean.
But the seafood is very good.
Yeah, it is very good.
I went there the other day, actually.
Nice.
Yeah.
Awesome. Venetian, which is down in Weymouth, traditional classic, Italian American food. And then La Padrona opening early May, late April, early May. We'll see when we got a big meeting tomorrow morning.
Yeah.
And that's going to be really classic Italian. We took our chefs to Italy for 2 weeks last year, and we just were like captivated. It actually changed my mind about Italian food generally. I mean, as a Greek, I'm really proud of the sourcing of our food and of our land. But Italians do it to the nth degree. I was like, my God, these guys are fucking good at what they do. I mean, they export their shitty product and they eat their best product. And, that's fucking great. And like your shitty product that you're exporting is that good? Like, fuck yeah. They take a lot of pride in what they do. Grandmother's cooking, went down to Puglia and just watching like old grandmothers making fucking pasta. I was like, you kidding me? Classic Italian at La Padrona. And then we have a couple other projects that are in the works that we feel are going to become staples here in the city.
Well, thank you so much, man. This was a really great conversation.
Awesome.
Really
yeah, for sure.